The air in the emergency room of Mercy General Hospital was always thick with a specific kind of chaos, a controlled professional frenzy that smelled of antiseptic and desperation. For Dr. Emily Carter, a first-year intern with eyes that still held the bright idealism of medical school, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. She moved between curtains, her stethoscope a cold weight around her neck, clinging to the protocols and procedures like a lifeline. It was on her third consecutive 12-hour shift that the first thread unraveled. A patient in Bay 3, Mr. Henderson, was prepped for an emergency appendectomy. His chart mentioned a previous, complex abdominal surgery performed 2 years prior by the legendary chief of surgery, Dr. Marcus Thorne. But when Emily went to pull the digital records to check for adhesions or complications, the file was frustratingly sparse. A glorious, PR-ready post-op report was there, detailing Dr. Thorne's brilliance, but the pre-op diagnostics, the specific anesthesia logs, the detailed nursing notes from recovery, they were all flagged as archived, or undergoing digital transfer. Archived? Emily muttered to the charge nurse, Brenda, a woman in her late 50s whose face had settled into a permanent expression of weary skepticism. What does that even mean? It's 2023, Brenda didn't look up from her computer. It means they're in the basement, sweetheart. The seventh circle of hospital hell. Paper purgatory. If you want them, you'll have to go down there yourself. Good luck. The basement of Mercy General wasn't just a place. It was a time capsule. The fluorescent lights hummed a dismal tune, flickering over endless rows of steel shelves crammed with obsolete equipment, boxes of old paperwork, and the ghostly shapes of furniture draped in white sheets. The air was cold, stale, and carried the faint, metallic scent of dust and forgotten things. Following the vague directions Brenda had grumbled, past the old morgue freezer, take a left at the broken dialysis machines, Emily found the records room. It was a cage within the larger basement, its chain-link fence topped with barbed wire in a bizarrely aggressive gesture. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was even more chaotic. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, labeled with years and departments. She found the section for surgical records, 2021, and began her search. It was tedious, dusty work. As she reached for a box on a high shelf, her foot caught on a loose tile on the floor. She stumbled, grabbing a nearby shelf for support. The entire structure wobbled dangerously. And that's when she saw it. Behind the wobbling shelf, which wasn't bolted to the wall like the others, was a space, a hidden alcove. Her heart, already pounding from the near accident, began to beat a different, more primal rhythm, curiosity laced with a spike of fear. She squeezed into the gap. It was a small, cold space. And in it were not the standard archive boxes, but older, sturdier containers, the kind that held legal documents. They were unlabeled. With trembling hands, she pried the lid off the first one. The file on top was thick. The name on the tab was blacked out with a heavy marker, replaced with a case number, number 734-21. But it was the deceased stamp, bold and red, that caught her eye. She flipped it open. Inside was the complete record of a patient, a John Doe. Photographs of a man in his 40s, strong build with a military tattoo visible on his forearm. Admission notes cited multiple organ failure following a routine elective procedure. The surgeon of record, Dr. Marcus Thorne. But the pages that followed told a different story from the clean, victorious narrative of Dr. Thorne's public persona. The anesthesia report noted an abnormal reaction to a specific drug, one not typically used in that type of surgery. The nursing notes from the ICU, scrawled in hurried handwriting, mentioned unexplained post-op hemorrhaging and unresponsive to standard treatment. And then, the most damning piece, a pathology report that had been misfiled. It indicated the presence of a rare, aggressive bacterial strain, one linked to a specific batch of surgical implants that had been recalled after this man's surgery. This wasn't a tragic complication, this was a cover-up. A patient had died because of a known, faulty product, and someone had meticulously scrubbed the digital record clean, leaving only the paper trail hidden in this tomb. Emily's blood ran cold. She grabbed another file, another Thorne patient, another mysterious death, this one a wealthy socialite whose family had donated a new wing to the hospital. The pattern was there, hidden in the inconsistencies, the missing signatures, the altered timestamps on medication logs. She wasn't just looking at medical files, she was looking at graves. And Dr. Marcus Thorne, the charming, brilliant surgeon who had shaken her hand at her orientation and told her she was the future of medicine, was the gravedigger. She spent the next hour in a feverish haze, photographing dozens of pages with her phone, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Every creak of the old building, every distant hum of the furnace, made her jump. She was trespassing in every sense of the word. Back upstairs, the bright lights of the ER felt alienating. She saw Dr. Thorne laughing with a group of residents, his presence commanding and warm. She felt sick. She had to confront him. It was the right thing to do. He was her superior. Surely there was an explanation. She waited for a private moment outside the doctor's lounge. "Dr. Thorne, could I speak with you for a second?" "Emily!" "Of course, what's on your mind?" "You look pale," he said, his voice oozing practiced concern. She led him to an empty consult room and showed him the photos on her phone. She started explaining, her words tumbling out too fast. "I found these in the basement in a hidden room. This John Doe, the pathology report, it doesn't add up. It looks like the implant was the cause, but the record was altered." The warmth drained from Thorne's face. His smile didn't vanish. It simply froze, becoming a cold, hard mask. He took the phone from her hand, scrolling through the images slowly. The silence in the room was heavier than any she had ever known. "Emily," he said finally, his voice dangerously soft, "you are a very bright young doctor. You have a tremendous future ahead of you." He paused, handing the phone back. "This is not part of that future. These are outdated, faulty records from a period when our digital archiving was in its infancy. There were errors, tragic errors, yes, but errors nonetheless. They were sequestered for a reason, to protect the hospital, to protect the families from unnecessary pain, and to protect young, impressionable doctors like yourself from jumping to catastrophic conclusions." "But the dates, the recalled implant," she stammered. "Coincidence." He cut her off, his voice gaining an edge of steel. "A tragic, horrible coincidence. Now you will delete those photos. You will forget you ever saw that room. You will focus on your work upstairs where you are needed. Do you understand me?" It wasn't a question, it was an order. And the look in his eyes, a look that promised professional annihilation if she disobeyed, was all the confirmation she needed. He knew exactly what was in those files. "I understand," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Good." The mask of charm slipped back into place. "I'm glad we had this talk. Now, I believe there's a laceration in Bay 4 that needs suturing." She nodded numbly and left. She deleted the photos in front of him, her heart breaking with each tap. But she had already emailed them to herself. The confrontation had failed. She was alone. The only person she could think of was Nurse Brenda. Later, in the break room, Emily approached her, her voice barely a whisper. "The basement." "The archived files. It's worse than I thought." Brenda stopped stirring her coffee. She looked at Emily's ashen face, at the fear she was trying so hard to conceal. She sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of the entire hospital. "I wondered how long it would take for someone to find it. Or if anyone ever would. You knew?" "I knew things happened. Patients of his would crash for reasons that didn't fit. Paperwork would change. People who asked too many questions tended to transfer out suddenly or have their careers stall." She leaned in closer. "You can't trust anyone. Not administration, not the other doctors. Thorne built this place's reputation. He is Mercy General. You're not just going up against a man, Emily. You're going up against an institution. What about John Doe, the patient with the tattoo?" Emily pressed. "Who was he?" Brenda's eyes grew distant. "They said he was a nobody." No family came forward, but that's not true. A woman came once, looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, asked questions. She said he was her brother, a veteran, said his name was Gabriel Miller. Security escorted her out. She never came back, Gabriel Miller. He had a name. Brenda became her silent partner, her guide through the hospital's underworld. She provided keys, diverted attention, and shared fragments of information. A name of a retired nurse who might talk. the password to an old server room that wasn't on the main network. Emily's investigation became a double life. By day, she was Dr. Carter, the efficient intern. By night, she was a ghost, piecing together a puzzle of corruption. She discovered that the faulty implants were part of a kickback scheme. Thorne was being paid by the manufacturer to use them, bypassing hospital procurement protocols. When patients inevitably died, he used his influence to bury the evidence, protecting both his reputation and his illicit income. The socialite's death was covered up because her family's donation was funding his current research. But the puzzle piece that didn't fit was Gabriel Miller. He wasn't rich. He wasn't a donor. Why was his cover-up so thorough? Why was he hidden deeper than all the others? Brenda, after days of silence, finally offered a clue. There's a part of the basement even the maintenance guys won't go to. Past the records room, down a corridor that was sealed off in the 90s. Rumor is it was an old surgical wing used for isolation cases. If you want the truth about that man, that's where you'll find it. But I'm not going down there with you. It was the final step. Emily knew she had to go. She had enough evidence to sink Thorne's implant scheme. But Gabriel Miller's story was the key to it all, the reason why Thorne would risk everything. She needed to know why. That night, with Brenda creating a distraction by setting off a false alarm on the opposite side of the hospital, Emily descended once more into the basement. This time, she went deeper, using bolt cutters on an old chain that barred a crumbling corridor. The air was colder here, the silence absolute. At the end of the hall was a set of double doors, the windows blacked out. One was slightly ajar. She pushed it open. The room was frozen in time. An old operating theater, preserved like a museum of horrors. The equipment was decades old, and in the center of the room, on a gurney, was a skeleton, not a medical one, a real human skeleton, still clad in the tattered remnants of a military uniform. On the forearm, faint but unmistakable, was the faded ink of a tattoo. Gabriel Miller. They hadn't just hidden his file, they had hidden his body. But that wasn't the wow moment. As Emily stood there, paralyzed by the horrific sight, the doors behind her slammed shut with a deafening finality. A heavy bolt slid into place on the other side. She whirled around, her phone's flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the small circular window in the door. And on the other side of the glass was a face she knew, but had never truly seen. It was Arthur, the ancient, mild-mannered archivist. The man who had smiled at her every day, who had helped her find boxes the first time she went to the basement. He held a large ring of keys in his hand. But the gentle, forgetful old man was gone. His eyes were sharp, cold, and calculating. He spoke, his voice clear and steady through the door, devoid of its usual tremor. "I told Doctor. Thorne, a smart one, would eventually find her way down here," Arthur said, his voice echoing in the tomb-like room. "He wanted to scare you off, threaten your career. I knew that wouldn't work. I've been watching you, Emily. Your curiosity, your tenacity. It's truly impressive." Emily could only stare, her mind refusing to process the betrayal. "You're wondering about Gabriel," Arthur continued, almost conversationally. "He wasn't part of the money. He was part of the science. The implant was flawed, yes, but for Thorne it was a perfect opportunity. A chance to test its failure points, its limits, on a subject no one would miss. A live human trial. I recorded everything. The data was invaluable. He wasn't just an archivist. He was the recorder, the documentarian of Thorne's atrocities, the keeper of all the secrets." "Why?" Emily choked out. "Progress, my dear," Arthur said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Medical progress has always required sacrifice. Someone has to do the messy work, and someone has to keep the records." He turned to leave. "They'll find me!" Emily yelled, pounding on the door. "Brenda knows I'm down here!" Arthur paused and looked back, and the pity in his eyes was more terrifying than any threat. "Nurse Brenda has been complaining of chest pain all evening." "It's a terrible tragedy. A massive coronary, right at her station." So sudden he walked away, leaving Emily alone in the silent, cold dark, with the bones of Gabriel Miller and the horrifying, undeniable truth. The conspiracy wasn't just one corrupt doctor, it was a system, and she was now buried at the very heart of it.